My card was declined at the grocery store checkout. I stood there, hands still extended toward the terminal. The little machine blinking red at me like it was personally offended. The cashier gave me that look the patient, practiced one they give to people who don't know their own bank balance. I smiled back, apologized, switched to my backup card. But I already knew. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 11 minutes. Didn't cry, didn't call anyone. Just opened my banking app, watched the screen load, and stared at a number that should have had 6 digits in front of the decimal point. It had 2. My name is Maya Sinclair, 29 years old, financial analyst. The kind of woman who color codes her spreadsheets and reconciles her accounts every Sunday morning before the coffee finishes brewing. I know where every dollar goes. I have known where every dollar goes since I was 17 years old and started keeping a notebook of every cent I earned babysitting the Hendersons down the street. So, when my card was declined, it wasn't confusion I felt sitting in that parking lot. It was confirmation. I called my ex-husband. He picked up on the second ring, which he never does, and his voice came out smooth and unhurried, the way people sound when they have been rehearsing. "Hey, Maya. Everything okay?" I asked him about the joint account we had agreed to keep open for exactly 30 more days, per our divorce settlement, for the final transfer of shared expenses. "Oh, that," he said. And then he paused just a half-second too long. "My mother helped me take care of some things. It's handled. You'll understand once the paperwork comes through." His mother. I thanked him. Hung up. Sat in that parking lot for 3 more minutes. Then I texted my attorney. It happened. Everything we prepared. Use it all. She replied in under a minute. Already on it. Don't reach out to either of them. I drove home. Made dinner. Slept 8 hours. What they didn't know, what neither of them had any idea about, was that I had been ready for this for 4 months. People think betrayal arrives like a car crash. Sudden, violent, impossible to predict. But mine came the way water damage does. Slow, invisible, working through the walls long before you see the stain on the ceiling. By the time I understood what was happening, I had already started building the case. Let me go back to where it actually began. My ex-husband and I were married for 3 years. His name doesn't matter anymore, so I'll just call him my ex-husband, which is the only title he earned that I'll acknowledge. His mother, I'll call her what she was, a woman who believed she had the right to manage everyone around her and called it love. The marriage ended because of reasons that are too ordinary to be interesting. We wanted different things. We grew in different directions. The divorce was mutual, civil, expensive in the way all divorces are, and supposedly clean. We hired a mediator. We split assets fairly. We agreed in writing on every single point. The joint account was supposed to hold our shared emergency fund, $340,000 we had both contributed to over 3 years, earmarked for property taxes on a house we sold, tax obligations we were still settling, and a final split we had both signed off on. It was supposed to exist for 30 days after the divorce was finalized, then get divided 50 over 50 and closed. That was the agreement. What actually happened started 6 months before the card was declined. His mother began calling me more than usual. Sweet calls. Checking in calls. She wanted to know how I was holding up. She brought food to my apartment twice, lasagna the first time, something with butternut squash the second time, both delivered with that smile she had. The one that made you feel grateful before you understood what it was covering. She asked questions. Small ones, scattered across different conversations so they never felt like an interrogation. How was work? Was I thinking about buying a new place? Had I talked to my financial advisor recently? Did I still use the same CPA? I answered her honestly every time because I thought she was being kind. Divorce is hard on families too. She had lost a daughter-in-law she said she loved. I believed her. I was wrong about that. The shift came at a dinner she hosted in February. My ex-husband was there, which I had expected. What I hadn't expected was his cousin, who turned out to be an estate attorney. That fact came up casually, mid-meal, the way pre-planned things always come up casually at dinners. Maya, his mother said, passing the bread, you know, with everything in transition, it might make sense to consolidate. Simplify. You have so much going on. I said I felt fine about where things stood. She smiled. Her son, my ex-husband, looked at his plate. We're just thinking about what's best for you, she said. You've always been too independent for your own good, sweetheart. Let the people who love you help. I smiled back, drove home, and for the first time since the divorce papers were signed, I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the weather. 2 weeks later, I noticed the mail. I had signed up for paper statements on every single account I owned the day my divorce was finalized. Old habit, my father's advice, always have paper backup. And for 2 weeks in a row, the statement from our joint account didn't arrive. I called the bank. They told me the mailing address on the account had been updated. I asked when. They gave me a date that was 4 days after my divorce was finalized. I asked what address it had been updated to. It was my mother-in-law's address. I thanked the bank representative, hung up, sat at my kitchen table with a glass of water, and thought about everything very carefully. Then I called my attorney, not about the address. Not yet. I called her because I had a question I needed to ask a professional before I did anything else. If someone changed the mailing address on a joint account without my knowledge and subsequently moved funds from that account, what does that constitute? She was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Wire fraud, she said. Potentially bank fraud. Possibly elder financial abuse statutes, depending on who was involved and how they characterize their role. I told her I'd call her back in a week. Over the next 10 days, I built a file. I requested paper statements through the bank directly, using my own credentials, which my ex-husband apparently hadn't thought to revoke because the account was still legally joint and I still had full access. I printed 6 months of transactions. I highlighted every withdrawal over $5,000. There were 11 of them. I took screenshots. I printed email confirmations. I requested call logs from the bank showing every phone interaction on the account for the prior 60 days. I photocopied everything twice. 1 copy went into a fireproof safe in my apartment. The second copy went to my attorney's office in a sealed envelope labeled to be opened upon my request. I also did one more thing. I called a forensic accountant. Her name was Dr. Patricia Reeves, and she came recommended by my attorney as someone who had testified in financial fraud cases 17 times and had never lost. I paid her retainer out of my personal checking account, not the joint one. I told her everything. She told me what to look for. She also told me something else, something I hadn't considered. If they moved the money offshore or into a trust, recovery gets complicated. But if they kept it domestic, we'll find it in 48 hours. I told her I would let her know when to start. And then I waited. The morning my card was declined. I had been waiting for 63 days. That evening, after I texted my attorney and made dinner and slept 8 hours, I woke up at 6 a.m. to 17 missed messages. 12 from my ex-husband. 3 from his mother. 2 from a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be his cousin, the estate attorney. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I forwarded them to my attorney, got dressed, and drove to her office. By the time I sat down across from her desk, she had already filed 3 things. An emergency injunction to freeze all accounts associated with my ex-husband, a formal fraud complaint with the state's Financial Crimes Division, and a report to the IRS flagging the transactions for review. I asked her how long the freeze would take to process. It's already done, she said, as of 7:14 this morning. She turned her laptop toward me. There was a confirmation number on the screen. I looked at it for a long moment. And Patricia? She found the money last night. Domestic. Split across 3 accounts, 2 in his name. 1 in his mother's name. Opened 2 weeks after your divorce was finalized. I sat back in my chair and felt something release in my chest that had been wound tight for months. What about the estate attorney cousin? My attorney smiled for the first time. He facilitated the transfer. That makes him a party to the fraud. We named him in the complaint. That afternoon, my ex-husband called 41 times. I know the exact number because I counted later, scrolling through my call log, almost impressed by the persistence. His mother called 9 times. At 3 p.m., she sent a text that said, "Maya, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Please call me. We can work this out as a family." I screenshotted it and forwarded it to my attorney. At 4:47 p.m., federal agents visited 3 addresses: my ex-husband's apartment, his mother's house, his cousin's law office. I was not there for any of it. My attorney had advised me to stay home, and I did. I made tea. I watered my plants. I finished a crossword puzzle. I'd started 2 days earlier. I was on my couch reading when my attorney called and said, simply, "Accounts frozen." All 3 subjects interviewed. Voluntarily for now, but the agents made clear the next conversation will not be voluntary. I put the book down and stared at the ceiling. Will I get the money back? Every cent. With interest. The transfers left a clean paper trail. They weren't careful because they didn't think you'd catch it in time. That was the part that kept circling back to me. They hadn't thought I'd catch it in time. He knew I was a financial analyst. He had watched me manage our household accounts for 3 years with the kind of precision that once made him joke that I could find a rounding error in a national budget. His mother had sat across from me at dinner tables and watched me calculate tips in my head faster than she could find her phone. And yet, they believed that grief and divorce and the general fog of a life coming apart would make me slow, make me sloppy, make me the kind of woman who doesn't notice $340,000 going missing until it's too late. That assumption was the only mistake they needed to make. 3 weeks later, I sat in a federal hearing room on a Tuesday morning. The kind of room that is aggressively beige, with fluorescent lighting that makes everyone look slightly unwell. My ex-husband sat across the table with an attorney I didn't recognize. His mother sat beside him, smaller than I had ever seen her look, no longer the woman who brought lasagna and spoke in that warm, certain voice about what was best for everyone around her. His cousin was not present. His attorney had filed separately. He was cooperating. The hearing officer opened with a summary of findings. Unauthorized account access. Fraudulent mailing address change. Wire transfer of $340,000 in 11 transactions over a period of 49 days. Attempt to obscure transfer through 3 separate accounts. All domestic, all traceable. My ex-husband's attorney tried 3 arguments. The first was that my ex-husband had believed he had implicit authorization to manage the funds given the informal nature of our post-divorce communication. My attorney placed our signed settlement agreement on the table and highlighted the clause that specified, in 2 paragraphs and very plain language, that neither party could access or transfer funds from the joint account without written consent of the other. The second argument was that his mother had acted independently and without his full knowledge. Dr. Reeves placed a timeline on the table showing that my ex-husband's phone had called the bank's customer service line 11 minutes before each of the 11 transfers. 11 times. The same pattern. 11 for 11. The third argument was that they had intended to return the funds once certain financial matters resolved. My attorney looked at the hearing officer and said, simply, "The standard for intent in wire fraud is not what someone planned to do eventually. It is what they did." The room was very quiet after that. His mother looked at me for the first time since we had sat down. She had always had an expressive face warmth when she wanted something, steel when she didn't get it. Right now, it was something I hadn't seen on her before. Fear. I held her gaze and said nothing. The hearing officer ruled. Full recovery of funds plus statutory interest. Civil penalties. The case file referred to the Financial Crimes Division for determination of criminal charges. A determination, my attorney later explained, that would almost certainly result in prosecution given the documentation we had provided. My ex-husband whispered something to his attorney. I didn't catch it. I wasn't trying to. His mother leaned forward suddenly, voice tight, controlled, but fraying at the edges. Maya, everything we did because we were worried about you. You were not in a good place. Someone had to make sure that money was protected. I looked at her for a long moment. Protected, I said quietly. In your name. Her jaw tightened. In accounts opened 14 days after my divorce was finalized, I added. With a mailing address change filed 4 days after the ink dried. She opened her mouth. You planned this before the divorce was final, I said. Not loudly, not with any heat in my voice. Just clearly, the way you state a number that's already been confirmed. You started planning it before I even filed. She closed her mouth. My ex-husband wouldn't look at me. He had developed a habit, I noticed, of finding something on the table to study intently whenever a truth entered the room. I stood, gathered my documents, and nodded to my attorney. We walked out into a hallway that smelled like old carpet and recycled air, and I stood there for a moment, doing nothing except breathing. My attorney asked how I was doing. "Good," I said. And I meant it. The money was back in my account by the following Thursday. The bank had a process for this, a brisk, administrative kind of justice that involved no ceremony whatsoever, just a transfer confirmation and a balance that was exactly what it should have been, plus $4,300 in interest that the universe apparently felt it owed me. I stood in my kitchen and looked at the number on my phone for a while. I wasn't celebrating. There was nothing festive about any of it. There is something deeply exhausting about being right when you wish you had been wrong. I would have traded every dollar to have a family that hadn't done this. I would have given all of it to have a mother-in-law who brought lasagna because she actually cared, not because she was mapping out what I owned. But I don't trade in wishes. I never have. The criminal referral resulted in charges filed 6 weeks later. Wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy. My ex-husband took a plea. His mother contested every charge and lost all of them. His cousin surrendered his law license as part of his cooperation agreement and moved to another state. None of it undid anything. It just attached the right names to the right actions. That morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. the same way I always do. Made coffee. Opened my laptop. Reviewed my accounts, every one of them. The way I do every Sunday. Everything was exactly where I had put it. I thought about something my father told me when I was 17 and keeping that notebook of babysitting money. He said that the most dangerous thing you can do with your finances is trust someone else to care more about your money than you do. Not because people are always dishonest. Just because no one will ever watch your money the way you will. I hadn't forgotten that. I had just, for 3 years, believed that some people were exceptions. Some people are not exceptions. I closed my laptop and looked out the window at a morning that had nothing dramatic about it. No sirens, no courtroom, no one on the other end of a phone rehearsing their lines. Just ordinary Tuesday light coming through the glass. My phone buzzed once. A notification from the bank. Balance confirmed. I picked up my coffee and took a long, slow sip. They thought a declined card would be the beginning of my downfall. They counted on me being too emotional, too disoriented, too busy grieving a marriage to notice the floor being pulled out from under me. They didn't know that I had been watching the floor for months. The last message I ever received from my ex-husband came 3 days after the sentencing. It was 4 sentences long. He said he was sorry. He said he had let his mother convince him it was the right thing. He said he hoped someday I could understand that he had still, in his own way, been trying to look out for me. I read it twice. Then I archived it with the rest of his messages. In a folder my attorney had labeled documentation, where it joined 11 bank transfer records, a mailing address change form, 47 call log entries, and a forensic accountant's report that told the complete story of what he and his mother had done in 48 precise, well-sourced pages. The folder was thorough, neat, color-coded. He always said I was too organized. He was right about that, at least.